It's Friday today. And I don't know about you, but when Friday hits for me, sometimes I just feel exhausted. And then I kind of sit down with my family on Friday or Saturday or Sunday and work to get into the minds of my kids. I ask them questions. I try to understand how their day's been or their week's been. I try to understand what's been going on in their lives. But when I sit down with a 2-year-old, it's like a different world. Their minds are racing. Their bodies need to move. And quite frankly, mine doesn't move as fast as I want it to anymore. And so being active and engaged with a kid that's from 1 to 4, sometimes for me looks like a movie night on a Friday night. Is that what's best for our kids? How do we build better rhythms to enter our kids in their places of development? Well, today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, Dr. Kathy has some important insights on some new data that's coming out that shows how having little kids sit in front of screens really challenges their development for the future. And as parents, we have a responsibility in this. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So Dr. Kathy, according to a new study from Drexel University in Pennsylvania, allowing very young children to access TV and other screens could lead to sensory changes for them later in childhood. The study is called the Early Life Digital Media Experiences and Development of Atypical Sensory Processing. It was published by JAMA Pediatrics on January 8th, and the study found that there's an association between greater screen time in the first 2 years of life and high sensory-related behaviors. The behavioral differences include things like sensory seeking, sensory avoiding, sensory sensitivity, and low registration. A child who is sensory seeking may be attracted to spinny or shiny objects, whereas a child that has low registration would typically kind of avoid eye contact and may respond in a timely manner to being called or to familiar voices. This is what the study is kind of pointing out and finding. The study found that children experienced different atypical behaviors depending on when they were exposed to screens. And the research team analyzed data on TV and DVD watching amongst 1,400 babies and toddlers from ages 12 months to 18 months to 24 months. So, Dr. Kathy, I think it's almost really kind of sadly incredibly normal, right, for our world to find young kids on devices, even kids as old as 18 months. It's natural for us to go to a restaurant or go any kind of almost any place, a home, and see kids in front of screens watching kind of entertainment, almost educational entertainment. There's whole industries that have been built around this, appealing to kids who are younger than 3. What do you make of this study, and what are your thoughts here?
I think it's really important, actually. A lot of our listeners may not understand the sensory challenges, but they're huge. And children who do not handle sensory things well, it can mess with their lives. It has to do with textures of food in their mouth. And how many of us now appreciate shirts that we can buy, like the one I'm wearing, that don't have tags in the back, but instead they've been imprinted with something? That all happened because of sensory issues, where children did not like tags on the back of their shirts. And so it's huge. And if, in fact, early exposure to too much technology causes them to have sensory overload issues, it's going to mess with everything. Can you imagine having a class of kids who are all looking for spinning and shining objects? They're not going to listen to a mom or a teacher in front who's talking about the ABCs. They're going to be looking around for where's the shiny object. So I think it's huge. I think it's terribly affecting attention span in some very terrible ways. And important. And by the way, they studied enough kids over enough time to make this legit. I'm impressed.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I think this is an impressive study. I do have to say, when you talked about the spinny, shiny objects, I had this mental image of the 1950s and like a flying saucer. You remember those like scenes and all the kids running to the side of it? Of course, we're going to look for those shiny objects. The one that scared me a little bit is the one where kids actually avoid eye contact, right? I mean, I'm a parent of young kids, and it's really hard because we find ourselves in this kind of entertainment-driven kind of push inside of culture, these practices that we want to have for our kids. and at the same time really calling our kids to recognize people and call them out. I find myself even at family gatherings saying, come on, Jimmy, like, why aren't you looking at your aunt in the eyes? And I don't know, I might be kind of in this place sometimes where we put our kids in front of these different entertainment devices, almost kind of like as an investment in educational practices, if you want to put those things in kind of air quotes. We think that it's educational to have our kids listen to music and watch a screen. But to take the time with toddlers to really kind of engage them in these unique ways is exhausting for a parent, right? There's a lot of times where I just feel wiped out at night. And at the end of the night, the last thing I kind of think about doing is, put entering into the mind of a 2-year-old for the last like 3 hours of the day. It's just kind of exhausting. Their minds are going, they're engaged, they're learning, and it's almost easier to kind of put sometimes a show on and watch it with them. What would you say to parents who are kind of turning to these different things? It's almost necessary at times, it feels like. What would you kind of say to those of us that are in this boat?
Well, yeah, it is understandable. So first of all, I have a lot of grace for, a parent with one kid who comes home overwhelmed, a parent with 8 kids who's, not all the kids are happy. We're all tired. We've got maybe 30 minutes before bedtime. What are we going to do? I understand that. I really do. What I don't want is for it to become routine, because our children benefit from interacting with us. They do benefit from us playing a game with them. One of the things that maybe I can point out, Wayne, that we've talked about before is the reality that children this young do not learn well from devices. So parents might be thinking they're doing a good thing by putting their kid in front of a large TV screen or a handheld device, and they're playing some developmentally appropriate game or activity, and that's better than trash. However, the research makes it clear that they do not retain what they learn on the device. You know why? Because there's no emotional rah-rah. It's when you play with the 3-year-old and you say, great job, that's the right letter, that it cements that in the child's emotional being and the intellectual part as well. So I understand it. I have a lot of grace, but let's not make it a routine, because our kids, we only have a few hours with them a day and a few days in a week, weeks in a year, years in a life. So let's use it well.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I think that's so true. To close here, I kind of want to take this angle of this cultural moment is really driven towards a lot of screen time. It's educations around screen time. And so sometimes I think it might be natural for us to feel like you kind of alluded to before, that putting kids in front of a screen might be that they're learning something, that they're kind of picking up on something that really almost like, quote unquote, this is the world they're going to live in for the rest of their lives. And so this isn't really going to be so different for them. What would be some of the benefits of, really pulling them outside of that cultural push to kind of have kids familiar with screens, or at least kind of used to watching them? Remember one time I was at a Bible camp and kind of taking care of kids, and there was a family that you could just tell the kids had never seen a screen. When the screen would turn on, their eyes would go right to it. It was so foreign to them. And everyone else, the screen was on and they were in the background, they were playing because they were so used to it. So it's a natural push, I think, for us to kind of say, this is their world. How can we kind of, how should we kind of engage this cultural moment as parents, knowing that screens are going to be present? What would you say to kind of help us with that?
I would say a few things. One would be, I do want children introduced to screens at home. I don't want them to be so naive about the tools and the tech that they go off on their own, whether that be their first job when they're 18, 16, or a school experience or a summer camp where somebody else has a device and they're clueless and they've never been taught to discern. They've never been taught to guard their heart and their mind and their soul. So yes, we start with this at home. But again, as one of many things, there are jigsaw puzzles and books to read and games to play and footballs to throw and parks to visit and museums to go to and neighbors to go serve when they need help. So as long as the screens are a part of what we're doing as individuals and as family units, then I think I could be pretty supportive of that. It does depend upon what we use devices for, and are we using them together? Is the whole family hunkered down looking over dad's computer trying to find which park to visit in the spring? That's much better use of technology than allowing a kid isolated in a room playing a game that's not developmentally appropriate. So it has a lot to do with what we do, how long we do it, when we do it, and what else we do. So yeah, it's challenging, right? I love that we're talking about it because the challenge is real.
I really appreciate the way that Dr. Kathy approaches this. She's so kind and gracious for us as we work to live in kind of the tempest of the living, sometimes it feels like, in our homes. But there's a verse that kind of came to mind as Dr. Kathy was talking today. It comes out of Psalm 101, and I'm going to begin reading at verse 1. I will sing of your love and justice. To you, Lord, I will sing praise. I will be careful to lead a blameless life. When will you come to me? I will conduct the affairs of my house with a blameless heart. I will not look with approval on anything that is vile. This verse was a verse that was sitting in front of the TV at my friend's house. It was something that was interesting to me, that the parents were working really hard to not only lead in a way, but to put before our eyes things that really helped us to question, what does this do for our house? What does this do for my heart? What does this do with my relationship with the Lord? And I think all of these matters really start in the hearts of us, of parents, and of those that are caring for kids. So today, as we enter into a weekend and we get into a place and a season of rest, a Sabbath opportunity here this weekend, may you take that and allow the work of the Lord to work in your heart and call out the things that maybe need correction, or maybe even call out the things that need to be celebrated. And doing that with our kids, telling them why we're doing things and what's kind of going on in our world, that makes a connection. And that also gives them courage to face dark times in the same way that we do. So I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast this week, this daily segment, Facing the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again on Monday.